"You criminal!" Karen shrieked, her face turning beet red as she glared at me from across the checkout line. "How dare you try to steal from this store?" I stared at her, dumbfounded, as she continued her tirade, drawing the attention of everyone in the vicinity. Gripping my FBI badge tightly in my hand, I tried to remain calm and professional, but this woman's audacity was quickly wearing thin. "Ma'am, I can assure you that I am not trying to steal anything," I said, my voice steady despite the urge to match her hysteria. "In fact, I'm an FBI agent, and I'm here on official business." Karen's eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might finally shut her mouth. But then, she let out a derisive laugh. "An FBI agent. Yeah, right. Like I'm supposed to believe that." She turned to the cashier, who was watching the scene unfold with a mixture of amusement and discomfort. "Don't let this criminal get away with." Before she could finish her sentence, I whipped out my badge and held it up for her to see. "I'm Special Agent Emily Reeves, and I can assure you that I am exactly who I say I am." The color drained from Karen's face, and she stared at the badge, her mouth agape. For a split second, I thought she might actually apologize. But then, her eyes rolled back in her head, and she crumpled to the floor in a heap. The cashier and I exchanged a bewildered glance, and I quickly knelt down to check on Karen. She was breathing, but unconscious. I called for an ambulance, and within minutes, the store was swarming with paramedics and police officers. As the paramedics loaded Karen into the ambulance, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. This woman had accused me of being a criminal, and now she was the one being carted off. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger problem. The next day, I found myself back at the police station, giving my statement about the incident at the grocery store. Detective Granger, a seasoned officer with a no-nonsense demeanor, listened intently as I recounted the events. "So, let me get this straight," he said, leaning back in his chair. "This woman, Karen, accused you of trying to steal from the store, even though you're an FBI agent." I nodded. "That's correct." I showed her my badge, and that's when she fainted. Detective Granger let out a low whistle. "Wow, that's one hell of a way to end a confrontation. Did she have any prior history with the police?" I shook my head. "Not that I'm aware of. This seems to be the first time she's caused any real trouble." Interesting." Granger jotted down a few notes in his file. "And you have no idea why she would accuse you of being a criminal?" I thought for a moment, trying to recall any details that might shed light on Karen's motivations. Well, from what I could tell, she seemed to have a bit of an entitlement complex. She was very vocal about her accusations and didn't seem the least bit concerned that I was an FBI agent. Granger nodded. "That tracks with the reports we've received about her in the past. Apparently, she's known around town for her, colorful behavior." "I see," I said, feeling a sense of dread wash over me. "So, what happens now?" "Well, since you're an FBI agent, we'll need to coordinate with your office to determine the next steps," Granger explained. "In the meantime, I'd suggest keeping an eye out for this Karen character. If she's as much of a loose cannon as the reports suggest, she could be a potential threat." I nodded, already dreading the thought of having to deal with Karen again. As I left the police station, I couldn't help but wonder what other surprises this case might have in store. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity as I coordinated with my colleagues at the FBI to determine the best course of action. It seemed that Karen's outburst at the grocery store was just the tip of the iceberg when it came to her troubling behavior. After digging into her background, we discovered a pattern of incidents where Karen had verbally accosted or harassed individuals, often in public settings. The police had been called on multiple occasions, but she had managed to avoid any serious consequences. "This woman is a menace," my supervisor, Agent Johnson, said, shaking his head in frustration. "We need to find a way to put a stop to her erratic behavior before she escalates to something even more dangerous. I nodded in agreement, already formulating a plan. I think the best approach would be to try and reason with her first, see if we can get her to understand the gravity of her actions. If that doesn't work, we may need to consider pressing charges or seeking a restraining order. Agent Johnson considered my proposal, then nodded. All right, that sounds like a reasonable strategy. Just be careful, Emily. This woman seems unstable, and we don't know how she might react. I had assured him that I would proceed with caution, and then set out to track down Karen. It wasn't hard to find her. She seemed to be a fixture at the local coffee shop, where she would often engage in heated debates with the staff and other patrons. As I approached her table, I could feel the tension in the air. Karen's eyes narrowed as she recognized me, and she immediately launched into a tirade about the corrupt government and how I was just another pawn in their scheme. I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm and collected. Karen, I understand that you have concerns, but the way you've been behaving is unacceptable. You've caused disruptions, made false accusations, and even endangered yourself and others. This needs to stop. Rather than backing down, Karen only seemed to grow more agitated. Oh, so now you're going to try and silence me, huh? Well, I won't go down without a fight. I knew then that reasoning with her was going to be a monumental challenge. But I was determined to find a way to get through to her, before her behavior spiraled even further out of control. As Karen's outburst continued to draw the attention of the other patrons in the coffee shop, I knew I had to find a way to de-escalate the situation before it got completely out of hand. Karen, please, I said, trying to keep my voice calm and even. I'm not here to silence you or anyone else. I'm simply trying to understand why you feel the need to lash out in this way, and to see if we can find a more constructive solution. Karen's eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward, her voice dripping with venom. A more constructive solution? Ha! The only solution I need is for you and your corrupt agency to leave me alone. I could feel my frustration mounting, but I forced myself to take a deep breath and try a different approach. Look, I get that you're upset, and I respect your right to speak your mind. But the way you've been behaving is causing real harm, both to yourself and to those around you. Isn't there a better way to get your message across? For a moment, Karen seemed to hesitate, as if she was actually considering my words. But then her expression hardened, and she slammed her fist down on the table, causing the cups and saucers to rattle. No, there is no better way, she shouted. As long as you and your corrupt government are trying to silence me, I'll do whatever it takes to be heard. Before I could respond, Karen suddenly jumped up from her chair and stormed out of the coffee shop, leaving me standing there, dumbfounded and unsure of what to do next. I knew that I couldn't let this go, but I also didn't want to escalate the situation further. Resolving to keep a close eye on Karen and her behavior, I turned and headed back to the FBI office, determined to find a way to put an end to her destructive antics once and for all. In the days that followed, I continued to monitor Karen's movements and behavior, working closely with the local police to try and build a case against her. But every time I thought I had a handle on the situation, she would find a way to slip through the cracks. One afternoon, as I was leaving the FBI office, I received a frantic call from the manager of the local grocery store. Apparently, Karen had returned and was causing another scene, this time accusing the store of discrimination and demanding to speak to the owner. Quickly, I made my way to the store, arriving just in time to see Karen in the midst of her tirade. She was berating the poor cashier, who looked utterly terrified, while a growing crowd of onlookers watched in stunned silence. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises," the manager said, his voice shaking. "Your behavior is unacceptable and is causing a disturbance." But Karen refused to budge, instead turning her attention to me as I approached. "Well, if it isn't my old friend, the FBI agent," she sneered, making air quotes with her fingers. "Come to try and silence me again, have you?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. Karen, this needs to stop. You're causing real harm, and it's only a matter of time before someone gets hurt. Please, let's talk about this calmly and find a resolution. But Karen was having none of it. She continued to shout and scream, her face flushed with rage, until finally the police arrived and began to escort her out of the store. As they led her away, Karen turned to me and spat. "This isn't over, FBI agent. You and your corrupt agency are going to regret the day you crossed me." I watched in silence as she was loaded into the back of the police car, my mind racing with the implications of her threat. I knew that I had to find a way to put an end to Karen's rampage, but the thought of what she might do next filled me with a growing sense of dread. In the days that followed, I worked tirelessly with my colleagues at the FBI and the local police department to build a case against Karen. We combed through her history, documenting every incident of harassment, disorderly conduct, and public disturbance, hoping to find a way to put a stop to her erratic behavior. But Karen proved to be a formidable adversary, using her knowledge of the legal system to evade prosecution and continue her campaign of intimidation. She would file endless complaints and lawsuits, often targeting the very individuals and institutions she had wronged, further compounding the problem. As the situation escalated, I found myself becoming increasingly frustrated and concerned for the safety of those around me. Karen's threats had taken on a more sinister tone, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was capable of something truly dangerous. One day, as I was leaving the office, I received a call from the local police station. They had apprehended Karen after receiving reports of a disturbance at the city hall. Apparently, she had managed to gain access to the building and was demanding to speak with the mayor, threatening to expose the corruption within the government. I rushed to the station, determined to get to the bottom of this latest incident. When I arrived, I found Karen sitting in a holding cell, her eyes wild and her hair disheveled. She glared at me through the bars, her lips curled into a sneer. Well, if it isn't my favorite FBI agent," she spat. "Come to try and silence me again." I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "Karen, this has to stop. Your actions are only causing more harm, and I'm concerned that you're going to end up seriously hurting yourself or someone else." Karen let out a harsh laugh. "Hurt someone else? Had. You're the ones who are hurting people, with your corrupt government and your lies." I shook my head, feeling a growing sense of dread. "Karen, I'm trying to help you, but you need to understand that what you're doing is wrong. You're putting yourself and others at risk, and it has to stop." But Karen refused to listen, continuing to rant and rave about the injustice of the system. As I left the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. In the weeks that followed, the situation with Karen only seemed to escalate. Despite our best efforts to reason with her and curb her erratic behavior, she remained defiant and unrelenting. She continued to make threats against the FBI and other government agencies, even going so far as to show up at the local field office, demanding to speak with the director. When the security guards refused to let her in, she launched into a tirade, causing a scene that drew the attention of the local media. Footage of the incident quickly went viral, with Karen's supporters rallying to her defense and painting her as a whistleblower being silenced by the corrupt system. This only served to embolden her, and she became more determined than ever to make her voice heard. As the pressure mounted, I found myself feeling increasingly frustrated and helpless. I knew that we needed to find a way to stop Karen before she did something truly dangerous. But every time we thought we had a solution, she would find a way to slip through the cracks. Finally, after a particularly harrowing incident where Karen had attempted to storm a government building, we decided that it was time to take drastic action. Working closely with the local authorities, we developed a plan to have her committed to a psychiatric facility for a full evaluation. The process was not an easy one, and it involved a lot of legal maneuvering and bureaucratic red tape. But in the end, we were successful in getting Karen admitted, much to her outrage and the dismay of her supporters. As I watched her being led away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, but also a deep sense of sadness. Karen was clearly struggling with some deep-seated issues, and I couldn't help but wonder if we had failed her in some way. But as the dust settled, I knew that we had done what was necessary to protect the public and prevent any further harm. And I vowed to continue working tirelessly to ensure that justice was served, no matter the cost. In the aftermath of Karen's involuntary commitment, the fallout was both swift and intense. Her supporters, emboldened by her perceived victimization, took to social media and the streets, staging protests and rallies in her defense. The media, always eager for a sensational story, latched onto the narrative of the wronged whistleblower being silenced by the corrupt government. Suddenly, Karen had become a household name, a symbol of the struggle against perceived injustice and oppression. Despite the growing public outcry, I remained steadfast in my conviction that we had made the right decision. The psychiatric evaluation had revealed that Karen was indeed suffering from a severe mental illness, one that had been exacerbated by her delusional beliefs and her obsession with exposing the truth. As the legal process unfolded, it became clear that Karen would require long-term treatment and rehabilitation to address the underlying issues that had fueled her erratic behavior. And while her supporters continued to rail against the system, I knew that this was the only way to truly help her and protect the public. In the end, Karen's story served as a sobering reminder of the complex and often deeply personal nature of mental health challenges. It was a harsh lesson in the need for compassion, empathy, and a willingness to seek help, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. As for me, I carried on with my work, determined to use this experience as a catalyst for positive change. I knew that there were many others out there like Karen, struggling with their own demons and in desperate need of support, and I vowed to do everything in my power to ensure that they received the help and understanding they deserved. In the end, the story of Karen and her downfall was a tragic one, but also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. For even in the darkest of times, there is always the possibility of redemption, if only we are willing to reach out and offer a helping hand.